Okay, so I've got a couple of questions first of all. Unfortunately, Warren can't be with us. I just got that just. Has sent a message. Steve is fine. The question is, Steve joining us fine? I gather you missed the ferry with all the terrible traffic and problems. Okay. Which is, so anyway, good to have you online because we will be relying on you today quite heavily. Morning, Nick. Okay. We also have online Councillor Spink who's joined us, and Richard is online and Paul online. And that was Mark. If I look, things up to just good. Okay, so we are core at this morning, which is good. I assume we haven't heard any later on. I believe that deals with item 1, which is just to get that straight before I go any further. I have to read out the emergency. In case of emergency, there are no planned fire drills. You hear the fire alarm is treated as real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. Nearest safe escape route is via the stairs to your left as you leave the main council chamber, public gallery, exit via the door at the back of the building, walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building until you've been advised it is safe to do so by a member of staff. If that deals with that. Minutes of the last meetings. We've got 2 to deal with today. First one I'll deal with is the 12th of November. I've got them both here with me. I've been through them both. Does anybody have any comments on the 12th of November? Okay, I'll move those. Look for a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Blake. Well, momentarily ahead of Joe, I think. All those in favour, please signify. That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. I'll sign those off. Very end. Morning, good to see you. Next item then is 2B, which is the minutes of the 26th of November. Any comments on those? Nope, I'll move them and look for a seconder. Oh, I think Nick got there just ahead that time. All those in favour, please signify. Joe, you happy with? You weren't here, okay, good. Well, good point. Right, those are carried. Thank you very much indeed. I'll sign those off. I should check that I was here. Good. Those. Right, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest today? No, good, thank you. Public question time. Mark.
Yes, right. You hear me? Yeah, Mark Jim with Unison. I've got 2 unrelated questions. The first question is the motion that was considered here on divestment, which then went to the full council. I'd just like a clarification. Is that motion now dead because it was ruled that it couldn't be debated by the chair, or will that matter come back to a future meeting of the full council or come back here?
Good question. One I'm very well prepared to answer. So the answer is it was deferred from the meeting in November. It was not allowed to be debated by the chair at the meeting in January. I have written to the chair and others reminding them that the motion was deferred with the agreement that it would be heard at a later date, and asking them to ensure that it will be on the agenda for the meeting at the end of February.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Chair. The supplementary question, in terms of the legal advice that was given by the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign in relation to the whole question of divestment, I know that's only one part of the legal advice that you might have received, but has that now been given detailed consideration, and if so, by whom?
Another good question. I'm not too sure what the latest situation is on the legal advice specifically regarding the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign document. It has been discussed at a number of forums, including at the LGA, including a referral, and I think there was a request to government as well that was made. But perhaps, Steve, do you have an update, anything beyond that?
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me, and apologies for not being there in person. That still remains the position as I understand it. The Scheme Advisory Board is considering the matter, and my suspicion is because of the detailed information that went from the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, many points which were raised of international law, that the Scheme Advisory Board is in turn waiting for some sort of steer from government as well. So until we get that clarification, there's not an awful lot we can do, unfortunately.
Thank you, Steve. I assume that we have no anticipated date when we will have an answer, or even a partial answer would be good, even to some of the points that were raised.
I'm not aware of any date being mooted by the Saab, no.
Could we then, given that Mark has raised it, and on behalf of the committee, could we ask, please, that they provide us, the Scheme Advisory Board, provide us with an update? I cannot imagine that it's simply in abeyance and has died a death. There must be some progress or some process happening as regarded. The contents that were submitted were a formal legal position, and I believe that would therefore demand a formal legal response. So if the Scheme Advisory Board could provide us with an update, that would be very helpful.
I'd be more than happy to write to them on that basis, Chairman.
Given that I'm just the chair of the meeting, does anybody else have any response that they'd like to give independent of that, or you're happy with that view? Councillor Lever.
Just to support that request, Chair, I think, I don't know about everybody else on the committee, but I kind of feel like a sitting duck on this matter because we're kind of in the dark. I understand Mark and others have come to this meeting a few times now trying to move progress on this, and we're a little bit in the dark because we have no steer on what legally we can and can't do at this point. So, I mean, it has been months now. I struggle to see why we're taking this long to clarify the picture. So I would like us to request in the strongest terms that we need an update, or at least a date when we will, clarification on when we might hear an answer.
Good, thank you. One follow-on I would ask, Steve, is are we aware, because the letter that came from the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign was not only to us, it was to a very large number of local authorities. Are we aware of any local authority who has so far responded to those legal papers?
As far as I'm aware from taking some soundings with funds who are part of Access, everybody is waiting for Saab to clarify matters, and again I suspect they're waiting for government to form a view on some of the international law aspects that were raised in that legal commentary we had.
Thank you, Steve. The only thing that I've seen to note on that would be that there have been further progressions on the matters that were raised in those legal papers, particularly at both the ICC and the ICJ, and other bodies joining those actions as well. So, this is not a stationary bus, so to speak. It is moving and developing, and I would not want us to be seen in any way as legally delinquent in not answering legal papers served on us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll take some further advice within Unison in terms of what progress there might be, and I'll liaise direct with you. But thank you for your consideration of that question. I do have just one other question on a totally an unrelated matter, and that is at the moment we have had an indication that the council might be looking at reducing the employer contribution into the LGPS because of various financial and budget considerations. Is that something that you can confirm and give an indication as to what any recommendation might be?
So I can confirm it's something that we look at, and we look at it continuously. I think it would be preemptive to identify what exactly will be or won't be in the budget at the moment. And although we've got some options which have been presented to us, I don't believe any of those have yet been decided upon.
Thank you for that. I know we can't take that any further today. I wanted to flag it up because some people have expressed a bit of anxiety that they knew that was being looked at. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to raise it with you. Thanks for that. And it has the time I've taken up has allowed Steve to get here for the main body of the meeting. Apologies, I won't be able to stay for long, not because I'm not interested, but because I have another meeting to go to. But thanks for your time.
Thank you for coming, Mark. All right. Next one then is item 5 on the agenda, which is members' question time. Do any members have any questions? I'll look to the committee first. I should say questions not raised somewhere else on the agenda. We don't want to necessarily bring things forward. I'm sure you've got questions during the meeting. Nothing here. We've got a couple of councillors online. I'll just turn to them and see if any of them put their hands up to ask a question. Can I just check, Megan, that they can unmute themselves? Can they? They can. Councillor Spink.
Sorry, I can't seem to turn my the camera's come on now. I haven't given notice of this question because it really arises out of the last public question, and that is this: that with regard to the stopping or postponing of the employer's contribution to the pension scheme, would such a decision be lawful? And I know that the committee is trying to find been trying to find an answer to that question for quite some time. But it does seem to me that it's a matter of extreme urgency, that we know whether or not withholding an employer's contribution, and certainly without contacting all of the beneficiaries, might be, in my view, unlawful. Does the committee have a view, or will there be a time limit set for when we will have an answer to that question, which has been mooted now for a good month or so? Thank you.
So I'll give you a part answer and then look to Steve to see if he wants to add something to it. There are a number of mechanisms that can be employed here, one of which is simply reducing the overall level of contributions. The mechanism that typically has been employed in the past is to smooth that increase or decrease by a maximum of 1% in any year. So it would be possible for us to agree to reduce the contribution rate by 1% in line with that effective policy, or indeed to increase it by 1% if that was deemed to be necessary. Beyond that, we have asked a number of questions of the monitoring officer and we have not got answers back on those yet. So I can't add anything further. Steve, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My understanding is...
I should say without disclosing any of the draft figures currently being discussed for the budget.
That's fine, because I have nothing to do with the authority's budget, so I wouldn't be able to disclose anything along those lines. But my understanding is the authority, along with any other employer, must pay the rate that the actuary certifies. So that's the obligation. And valuation is on the agenda later on, but if memory serves me correctly, there was a discussion at the committee last time that did set a kind of financial envelope within which the funding strategy statement will operate going forward, with set steps down for pension contributions for most employers. But we could probably get into that kind of detail when we discuss the valuation item with the actuary shortly.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve Milford's got his hand up too.
Yeah, so thanks, Chair. I can offer well, an opinion, not opinion, a statement of fact, really. As I work in finance, the employer's contribution is kind of a deficit contribution. It makes up the balance needed, and so it can quite lawfully be varied accordingly to, as long as the funds are fully supported. The employee's contribution is fixed by statute, as are the employee's benefits. So though the employees themselves might not have been consulted on it, their benefits and contributions are entirely unaffected by the employer's any change in the employer's rate.
And just to follow up on that information, thank you for that, Steve, by the way. At the last meeting, there had not been, because it was a question that came up, any dialogue on that matter with the other affiliated bodies. I believe that's still the case, unless anybody can correct me otherwise. No, still the case then.
We can cover this in the valuation, but we have consulted on the funding strategy statement that sets out broad parameters for future contributions and steps down over the next 3 years, as I say, for most employers. So that's something that the fund wrote to all employers about, received a few comments, but is the subject to an agenda item shortly.
Right, so we'll deal with the next level of detail on that later on in the meeting. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. May I just raise, sorry, but may I just raise, if that's going to be discussed in the next part of the meeting, namely the part of the meeting that the public is excluded from, I don't know if now is the appropriate time, but I would like an opportunity to explain why I believe that I should be allowed to take part in that private part of the meeting. So I don't want to take up the committee's time now if you would prefer to deal with it at the time. But on a previous occasion, not when you were chairing, Chair, but on a previous occasion, those of us who were watching remotely were simply, this was another committee, the Finance Committee, but we were simply remotely cut off and couldn't participate in the meeting. Now, councillors don't have an automatic right to participate, but they do have on the basis of a need to know right. And I would submit that I have a need to know whether or not a right to know whether or not the proposed employer cuts are lawful. And so if that's going to be discussed in the valuation, then I would like to be present, please.
Right. So I think when we come to the point of the exclusion, we can deal with that. I'll be very pleased to hear your representation. We did clarify this recently, and the exclusion, in fact, I had the same happen to me in another meeting, which I won't go into at the moment, will I, Ed? Where we exclude the press and public. That doesn't exclude members. Members are allowed to be kept on within the meeting, provided they can show that inference at the chairman's discretion. And I'm aware of the session that happened, in fact, happened in this chamber only a week ago, where somebody had requested access to papers which were at the chairman's discretion. Unfortunately, that occasion, they were not allowed to see those papers, which meant they couldn't participate in that part of the meeting. But we'll deal with that under item 8, Peter.
Certainly. That's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to flag it up so that my mic and camera wasn't turned off summarily. But thank you, Chair.
I'm just going to check on a technical question. I assume when we exclude people, we can keep some people on and some people off, can we? Because we don't want to kick Steve off in particular.
No.
Okay. Thank you. It is technically possible, Peter.
Thank you.
Even though you're remote. Good to know. All right, thank you very much for that. Item 6 on the agenda then is reports for noting. And the first one we have are the minutes of the local pension board. So I'm going to turn to Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to just point out from the last meeting that we were encouraged by the movement on recruitment and retention by the fund. It has been a long-standing issue, operational risk, and a proper staffing structure outside of the bounds of the council's non-pension structure and rules of HR rules to for operational risk. So we're happy for the improvements on that. We are still concerned about retention of staff once they're trained. We have got as you know, an exceptionally busy 26-27 before us. We know about the good governance and the pooling changes. We've also got the access and fairness, access and protection changes, things like new fair deal coming in, councillor access coming in May to the pension fund, changes to how maternity leave is treated, how absences are treated, bringing in scope death grant lump sums to inheritance tax to virtually make pension administrators having to administer estate taxes from next year. And looking at all death grant lump sum, death grant lump sums since 2014 to check there was no discrimination. So the list goes on, and it's in the papers today about GMP Rec. So there's a long list of things that need to be done. The government isn't holding back on the timetable. It's expecting things to happen fairly immediately. So there is still that operational risk. That does the fund have bandwidth to take on all these projects coming up, as well as the ongoing projects it already has. So it's something we'll continue to monitor. And as I say, we are glad that we have, as the strategic pensions manager said to the meeting, outlined all the progress that has been made on those in those areas. So that would be something I would highlight as an ongoing thing that we're monitoring. But aside from that, I think I'd take the paper as read as it is, and happy to take any questions from the minutes.
Thank you, Martin. I think we're becoming increasingly familiar of all the changes that are coming down the pipeline. So thank you for articulating a few of them. They're quite a long list, and many of those have been reflected in the risk management profile that we've now got at the back, which doesn't look very pretty as a result. Is the best way I can summarize that. Any questions from the members of the committee to Martin? Professor Stevens.
In actual fact, you virtually covered what I was going to ask, which was paragraph 19 or point 19 on here about the resilience of the, well, it says here, on pension administration, progress has been made in increasing staff resources to improve future resilience of the fund. And although you've given quite a rounded view on it, are we satisfied with the progress we're making at the moment? And are we ready for what, as the chair said, what is coming down the line later in the year as well? Just concerned that, the two lines I marked out, Chair, you've picked up on, but I'm still going to raise that as a query or a concern of mine.
Yes, and as I say, there has been a lot of work looking at the structure and the and the recruitment and changes to that. So I say a lot of positive moves, but in some ways the proof's in the pudding. When will those staff, once the new staff are trained, are they going to stay, or are they going to look at other opportunities? So is the pension fund staff, are they properly remunerated in the marketplace? because there is a demand for skilled LGPS administrators, and they can be pulled into other markets. So that looking at is are the gradings right, competitive, and will we hold on to them? If we hold on to them, that will avoid the issues.
So thank you for that. Just before I call you in, Richard, I do need to point out that this is that these things coming down the pipe are not things that we are choosing ourselves to put into the pipe. That there is another example really of things being done to us as a local government pension fund, rather than us instigating them. We have no way to contain the actions of government in making these changes, or what often appears to be us completely unrealistic timescales that they give us to complete them. The same is true, of course, with the Access Fund, where it's not simply a question of saying, okay, we will sell all these assets today, and that transaction goes through at midnight. Many of these things have an exit protocol, which is quite lengthy. I don't know whether that reflects a naivety within the government in terms of managing local government pension schemes, but it certainly creates a great deal of stress for us, and in particular the officers involved. Richard.
Good morning, committee. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify on the point with regard to recruitment and staffing. As you know, we've had a restructure plan in place, which was approved about last September time. Since then, I can comment that there have been 4 people promoted. We've actually recruited 1 person. We have 2 further people joining the team on the 1st of March. And we've got a dedicated training and development plan that we're putting in place subject to approval as part of the budget planning process. And with regard to sort of like concerns about staff retention as well, I'm pleased to say that staff retention has improved quite a lot. We've only lost 1 member of staff in the last 12 months. So I think that's sort of like hopefully brought a lot more stability to the team, as well as increasing the team too.
We also received copies, Martin, of your forward work plan as well. So it looks like you're going to have a busy year. Louisa, were you just going to point out Richard with his hand up? Yeah, you weren't going to say something yourself. All right, thank you very much. Okay, 6B then, which is the business plan update. Steve. Have we lost him?
Yep, sorry, Chairman. Yes, thank you very much. Just to say a few words about it, the business plan essentially captures a lot of the business as usual work of the pension fund. But just to briefly recap on some of that work, you've got a detailed risk register in the appendices, and I'll speak about 1 or 2 of the key risks in a moment. You've got a legislation update, and you've got information on training, including a draft record of training by the committee over the last 12 months or so. You've also got a list of business plan work that we're on with, much of which is business as usual that will continue into next year, and some of which is project related. An obvious area is all the pooling work that we're engaged in to transition to a new asset investment pool. Although the 1st of April is a deadline to be in a new pool, that work will continue for the coming months as well after that, as we settle into a new investment pool. I was going to highlight the admin side, but Richard's already done that for me by reference to the extra resource that the admin team have got, and that's to build up resilience over the coming months. Naturally, not everybody recruited will hit the ground running, so we're also investing significantly in training with a sort of medium-term view that the team will be able to be more resilient, and we can rely less on the admin support from Hyman's Robertson over the medium term. In terms of risks, you've got several tables setting out different categories of risks. I think table 1 sets out all the red risks. The one I particularly highlight that we continue to work on is just ensuring there's a proper separation between the council as an employer and what it does, and the fund and its responsibilities. So that's an ongoing piece of work that will stretch into next year as well. You've got a table that highlights some of the new risks, and the one I'd highlight there is just one we're very conscious of at the moment is any failure to comply with the requirements from government with regard to being in a new investment pool from the 1st of April. And you've also got a table that highlights any changes to the risks. The one I'd highlight there is around the McLeod work, which is an ongoing project with a deadline of next April to review all cases that might be affected by the McLeod judgment. And there's been some delays there in securing through procurement the help from Hymans Robertson to do that work. So we flagged that as a significant risk and a possible failure to meet that deadline. That's firmly on our radar to progress as urgently as we can. The report also highlights there's some internal audit work being undertaken over recent weeks, but unfortunately the committee just come a little bit too early to report on that, so that should feature next time around. There's been quite a flurry of activity from government in terms of legislation as well, and new regulations or draft regulations and guidance has been issued. So the report highlights one or two of the key areas there. For example, there's an expectation from government or requirement from government, a legal requirement that there'll be a senior LGPS officer as a new statutory role for all pension funds, and that will be with a target date of the 1st of October this year for that. And there's also a statutory requirement for an independent person to be appointed to pension committees to enhance governance as well. So that's areas where we need to amend how the fund operates. And as expected, government have also highlighted a very high bar for knowledge, both from the committee members' point of view and from officers' point of view, on knowledge and understanding in the pensions world. So to some extent, we've anticipated that through our strategy on training, but there's still more to do, and there'll be still more training to do to make sure we meet that bar. You've also got the breaches log, but I won't say too much about that because that's essentially part 2 item. So if we want to discuss that, I'll have to wait till the part 2 item. So that's a quick canter through an awful lot of ongoing work at the moment, but hopefully giving you some key highlights. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Just one general question. I'm very happy with the actual main section, which is, page 24, 25, for example, I've got open in front of me, which seems to be at about 12 point. The actual point size of the text drops to about 2 point when we come on to Appendix 2. And I wonder if we could just keep everything in the documents at a larger font size. I don't know how we do that, just to have some standardization within it. We do leap around quite a bit. And certainly if I look at the appendices, 2 and 3, they're absolutely minuscule. My eyesight's not bad, but I really needed to get a magnifying glass out for those or use my camera on my phone. But if we could find a way to, make it more readable, that would help. The other one, if it is possible, would be to say, can we either keep portrait mode or landscape mode? And I would prefer portrait mode as a consistency through the document, because when I'm going through the electronic version, it doesn't automatically switch. And I'm really bad at reading my screen when it's edge on, with my head tilted to the side at 90 degrees. So just that's a personal plea, I think, at this time. On the points you've mentioned, Steve, I've highlighted those in my own copy. So on page 24, item 37, could you just tell us what the process is for achieving that, please? And the same on page 25 on item 37B, what the process is for achieving that, because those may take some time to actually establish, and a recruitment process. And I'm assuming that would come under the pension fund not the Isle of Wight Council staffing system? Given that they would be recruited by the pension committee, not by Isle of Wight Council per se. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to come back on those points, Chairman, we have raised the issues of those two new legal requirements through the authority's corporate management team. And I think the guidance does refer to the fact that the senior LGPS officer, which is a new statutory role and can't be identical to any existing roles, such as the Section 151 officer, I think the guidance says that's a matter for the chief exec to consider and make that appointment. I can't off the top of my head remember exactly what it says about the independent person. All this is still fairly hot off the press stuff, but it's certainly on our list to approach HR to see if there's any guidance there about how we draw up an appropriate job spec. So all this is still fairly new. So although we've flagged it up with the council and senior officers within the council, we've yet to do the actual doing work, as it were, to make that recruitment. But we've had highlighted as well the deadlines of the 1st of October to have people in place.
All right, so more to cover on that at a later date, and clearly a process to be sorted out. But my final one, and I couldn't even ask, is 44 on page 25. What is which relates to the budget for the pension fund? What is the timescale for that, please?
Yeah, unfortunately, we won't be able to do that this side of the 1st of April. It will inevitably be something that goes into next year. Unfortunately, we're fairly occupied with the pooling work and the legal compliance required for that for the 1st of April. So I'd like, we could certainly give an update at the first meeting that's in the new financial year, but I'd struggle to say that we'll have bottomed that out and better give you a chapter and verse on a pension at that meeting because of the requirements of the pooling work, unfortunately. But we can certainly look to give you an update that is something we are making some progress with.
Right, thank you for that. And I think the answer is yes, please, to that, because I saw a few nods going on. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding risk 32, I know we can't retrospectively participate in discussions that have already happened, but do we have a view of the discussions that did happen and the decisions on the back of them, and do we have retrospective access to the documentation?
Steve, risk 32. I'm just checking which section of the report this is actually in.
Page 22. It's the failure to comply with government expectations.
Right. So that's okay. So that's in Appendix 2, which is still within the public section.
What page number?
What page? 22.
Yeah.
Is it paragraph 27, Chairman?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this reflects the fact that at the time of writing this report, the new guidance that reinforced the legal requirements was pretty hot off the press, which sets out guidance in terms of moving assets into new pools within 3 weeks of being a participant in the new pool. So effectively, if you have to be in the new pool by the 1st of April, you're looking at the 21st of April for that new pool to be in control of all your assets. It also sets out the requirements we've mentioned in terms of governance, of having a new statutory officer and having an independent person on the committee and so on. So we've flagged that as red risks because it's not quite legislation yet, but there's no reason to think that Parliament's going to hold anything up here. But it is a kind of work in progress, as you'll appreciate, and because of the legal requirements and that government are keeping a very careful eye on many aspects of this, certainly the pooling, we've included as a red risk. We've probably got enough fleshed out now from government in terms of the draft regulations and supporting guidance to crack on in earnest with a lot of that work, which is not surprising, as it were. We knew the pooling requirements were coming in any case, if that's any comfort.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Emma here, unusually at this point in the meeting, because it's worth just hearing from you on what the reality of the situation is of delivering funds into a new investment within Central within 3 weeks of joining it.
I think there's going to be an element of just making them under central control rather than all the assets being within central funds. So it'll be a renaming initially within those 3 weeks, but actually transitioning all of your assets into the pool would not be possible in those 3 weeks, particularly the assets that are held outside of access, that are in private market funds. They could be a number of years before they're actually within the pool. So you'll have legacy assets as well. So 3 weeks is a very, very tight turnaround to expect that type of transition.
I think the number of years was my assumption as well. Even if you put it in statute, you have to do it within 3 weeks. It doesn't mean it's actually possible. Odd request. Thank you for that question, Joe, and thank you for the assistant with the answer. Any other questions on this section? Sorry, Vanessa.
Yes. When we go to the senior LGPS officer, how does this fit? Not going to work. Thank you. How does the LGPS officer fit into the current hierarchy? Will you be subject to them, Steve? I just can't understand or work out why one is being appointed, and quite where they fit into current setup. And secondly, as the chairman has said, I would have thought that the pension fund will be responsible for paying their salary, in which case it should be the pension fund and its advisors who employ somebody of this state. My second question is the independent person being appointed to the committee. Will this be a voluntary thing or will they be paid? Thank you.
Steve, if you want to add that to your list of unknowns, please do. We're not you don't, and please don't guess.
Fine. Coming up with the last one first, my expectation would be that it'd be a paid post, particularly as 86 funds, is it nationally, will all be seeking a person by the end of September. I would have thought to do so in that kind of environment would have to mean remuneration of somebody, to be quite honest. In terms of the senior officer, I mean, it's a little bit delicate in a way. I don't want to step into conflicts of interest territory for personally on that basis, but I have flagged it up to the chief exec, who is having a look at how you go about making that appointment and liaising with HR. I think the guidance says it has to be of a certain level of seniority to be able to engage in issues of, has the fund got adequate budget, has the fund got adequate resources to make sure it's delivering its services to the required standards in line with TPR and so on. So it does need a certain gravity of that position, but we've tabled that with the corporate management team at the council, and I believe Wendy is having a look at that.
Councillor Blake.
Sorry, Chair, just allowing that to proceed. Steve, you mentioned briefly about training, and I note that this agenda doesn't have a specific item on training as previous agendas various committees this council has had. But is there sufficient training being undertaken across both the pension board and the pension committee to satisfy the government to their requirements?
I think the short answer is probably not, to be honest. We need to have a look at that. There's 9 areas the government have said are an essential requirement. As I said, they're fairly hot off the press, so we're having a look at that. We're also doing it in the light of work we'd need for induction post-election as well, and drafting up what we'd need to do. But Louisa may be better placed than myself to comment there, but our current thinking is we probably need to fit in some fairly urgent training between the date of the full council making committee appointments and the first committee meeting to bring people up to speed in line with the government's requirements, which will be the law by then.
Thank you, Steve. It would be really nice if the government would actually stop giving us requirements, or give us a plan of all the requirements they're going to require within the next 12 months before they so decide. But I don't think we'll probably get any of that. Louisa.
Yeah, no, I haven't got anything to add, but thank you ever so much, Councillor Blake. Noted that you have completed all your modules online, so thank you very much. So yeah, so all 8 modules done by Councillor Blake, so thank you very much for that. And all the advanced training we do, everyone attending, thank you ever so much, because it does really help the log. So I think we're making great progress. So thank you ever so much, and thank you, Councillor Churchman, for attending lots of conferences throughout the year. It all adds to the evidence. So again, big thank you. I think we might have sent a request round to say if you've got any background experience you want to bring, so we've put together like a bio maybe to highlight, you know, the experience you bring from previous lives as well. You know, any evidence we've got is welcome. But yeah, just a big thank you for everything that you're doing. Unfortunately, yeah, there's going to be more to come. But yeah, we're looking for clarity on the 9 areas that they've just put out in the new draft guidance. Yes, and we're working closely with colleagues in the council at the moment on the new induction programme. Maybe, you know, we'd welcome your views actually. So I would say we've been looking through sort of where the slots are for new councillors coming in, and obviously hopefully you'll all be appointed again. It'll be lovely. And you know, your feedback, because you've been on the journey, it would actually be great to have your feedback because you've been through it once. And if you think with hindsight, I wish I'd known. So yeah, we have started working on that. So again, welcome your views. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. I can see my colleagues to the left all drooling with anticipation at the thought of the 17 plus 9 modules plus whatever other requirements the government throws us for the next 12 months, and really getting to grips with that solidly. Silence. Right, so thank you for that. We'll move on. So that one's duly noted then. So number 7 then on the agenda. The first one is the GMP rectification update, and this is with Richard.
Hello. Hopefully everybody can see me. Oh, just having.
Not yet.
Yeah. We're there now. Yeah. Yes, the GMP rectification project. This was brought to the board back in December to set out where we were with this particular project, because as is mentioned in the report, it was suspended in sort of like back end of sort of like 2023, beginning of 2024 due to resourcing issues. So we've decided to obviously proceed with this project now because there's an urgency to it. And we presented it to the board, who have endorsed the recommendations made by officers. There were a number of things highlighted that sort of probably which the board wanted to highlight, which one of the main one was about can we quantify how much the over and under payments were being made to members, to pensioners. So where possible, we've tried to include that information. We've also, there's a number of appendices associated with this, and one or two tweaks have been made to the guidance in appendix 3, which talks about sort of like thresholds and triviality with regard to sort of like looking at sort of like whether we pursue a particular case to resolve it. So we've clarified that as well. For the benefit of anybody that doesn't sort of like have is particularly familiar with GMP rectification or GMP generally, this was part of the state second fund or state earnings related pension scheme. And back in 1978, members or pension funds could opt out of the state second scheme, and they would incorporate the guaranteed minimum pension as part of their benefit structure. This continued until 1997, and in 2016 this contracting out arrangement ceased, and as a result HMRC asked for all pension funds across the UK to sort of like reconcile the information they had with the information that was held on the pension funds with the state itself. That was completed by the third-party advisor at the time, Mercer. However, out of that, there came obviously some differences. So we're moving to this phase now where we're looking to sort of like correct those rectification issues. And in effect, what it is there's probably quite a number of people that have been overpaid of their pensions. So it's just a matter of reducing those pensions to make sure that they are paid in accordance with the LGPS regulations. One of the recommendations that I wanted to put forward with regard to the nature of this project is some very technical nature. So being a new team that we're developing, there are parts of it that probably cannot be completed within the team itself. So we're looking to procure an external advisor, and hopefully the committee will agree to this, to deal with the more technical aspects of the project. And then as the project develops, whether we can bring some of that back in-house as well, so it can be done by a larger team. That's something that's going to be ongoing as well as an ongoing view. The other item that I just wanted to is there are a number of sort of like discrepancy in data decisions to be considered. And one of the recommendations was that as sort of like administration manager, I'm happy to take on that responsibility, to take a view on those decisions. They were originally by Mercer suggested that sort of like it should go to committee, but if the committee are happy for those to be delegated to myself, then I'm happy to take on that responsibility. Are there any questions on this particular project?
Councillor Churchman.
Just a quick question. What about those who have deceased? Is there a claim on their estate, for example?
Yes, we will be looking at any deceased members, and if they've been underpaid, where they've been overpaid, we would not look to recover any overpayments. Where they will have been underpaid, we will make an assessment. Within Appendix 3, we've set out quite a range of guiding principles of how we would treat all these different scenarios. This is LGPS standard. Many other funds across the UK have already gone down this particular path. So we're trying to be consistent with other administering authorities across the UK. And to lead on to that question as well, where spouses' pensions are put into payment, those will also be reviewed with regard to make sure that they are being paid at the correct level.
Thank you. The amount of overpayments and underpayments from memory added together were only about £62,000. We're not talking about astonishing amounts of money here, are we? So presumably, Richard, there's some threshold at which no action is taken anyway on any account, simply because it's not practical to do so.
Yes, with regard to the thresholds, we're looking to sort of like, if it's less than £60, we would not pursue it. We would just accept that £60 per annum, that is. So that would be the view on that. I would say with regard to the 62,000, that's only of the cases where we can identify the difference as it stands at the moment. So that only represents a small proportion of the fund. Just looking through the document, that's probably about Yeah, but 87 cases out of the 370 that we're looking at.
And just for clarity, during the exercise where we were identifying differences, were we able to identify the 100 or so members of the scheme who we believe are actually deceased?
Yes, we've got a definitive number of those members that would have, and also would have deceased since the project was paused as well. So we will be reviewing those cases. So we will do it in tranches. Yes.
Thank you. Steve.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Richard. I think it's fairly clear from it, but can you just sort of, in summary, confirm the general principle will be that anyone who's been overpaid, no action will be taken, but obviously you'll rectify things ongoing. And could you just outline the sort of mechanisms through which people who've been underpaid would be compensated?
Yes, I can confirm that anybody that has been overpaid, there will be no attempt to recover the money. We will, however, obviously be writing to them to correct and say that going forward that we'll have to pay the correct level of pension. With regard to underpayment, that will fall into two parts. Firstly, we would calculate the underpayment for the period of underpayment, and some of these might go back 10, 20 years, depending on when they started their pension. And then on that, there will be interest paid for the late payment, and that will be separated out. And within the guidance, that will be paid at a rate of base rate plus 1%.
And presumably, Richard, that will involve some recalculation of taxation liabilities.
We would, I think the general view across the LGPS industry is that when it comes to tax liabilities, that's a matter of personal self-assessment with the member. We probably should put up some frequently asked questions on the website to just set out how members should treat that situation and offer some guidance on what next steps they should take. But that is an area that we would be bound by HMRC and what their guidance is with regard to the sort of like individual taxation.
I think some Q&A would be a very good idea. It generally is. It also, of course, feeds into the current system where many issues related to pensions and the taxation of are also reported to HMRC. So they're pre-populated effectively on people's tax returns going forward, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. As I say, we wouldn't be able to deviate from anything other than HMRC advice. So I suspect there might be one or two extra tax payments that certain members may have to make. However, I would say that the vast majority of pensioners have been overpaid as opposed to underpaid. That's the expectation.
Thank you, Richard. Any more questions of Richard on this one? No. So I'll move the recommendation, which is, I'm not going to read it all out, item 3 on page 71, and look for a seconder of that. Thank you, Nick. Everybody in favour of that? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Richard. Very well done. Thank you. Be good to get this started again and bring it to a conclusion. One to tick off on the list, I think. Next item on the agenda then is 7B, which is the responsible investment policy. And I'm going to hand over to Emma, I'm told at this time.
So last year, everyone on the committee and the board were sent a questionnaire seeking their views on all things responsible investment. Can you hear me?
A bit closer. Well done.
So everyone was issued a questionnaire seeking their views on responsible investment policy matters, environmental, social, governance, things like exclusion and local investment policies. And we then had a training session in September last year discussing the outcome of those questionnaires and trying to seek more of the committee's views with the aim of putting it all together in a responsible investment policy. Now, this policy is fully owned by the committee and should reflect your views. We've just pulled it together for you based on our understanding. but this will serve as the basis with which you engage with your pooling partner. So as you are aware, your fiduciary duty for investing your asset is going to transition to the pool. You will lose direct control over how your assets are invested. You will then engage with the pool and influence them on how you would like your assets to be invested, the types of products you would like them to make available, and for example, things like exclusions, what brand of investment solution they make available to you for investing or how they invest your assets. So it's really important that you set out clearly what the objectives of the committee are, what the beliefs of the committee are, and your views when it comes to all these important matters, so that you can give them to the pool and say, this is the way we want you to invest our assets, and then it is up to the pool to either do that or not do that. And if they do not do that, then you can monitor them and engage with them further on those matters. So it also covers things like local investment, and there's some criteria there around expected return on those investments as well. We've put in a cap of they have to at least exceed the discount rate that is in your valuation as determined by the actuary, for example. And then also there is an element, we've had some feedback because this was sent out in advance for comments. We have made the adjustments that were proposed to the wording changes, all with the exception of one. There was a request to move the reference, and I've highlighted it in yellow, to the net zero target of 2050. Now I've left that in only because that is Central's target. So your assets are going to be invested in line with that net zero target, regardless of what's in this policy. And to take it out of your policy and weaken it, there's not necessarily a reason to do that. You would maybe want to strengthen your targets for the pool rather than weaken your targets if the pool are already going to have a 2050 net zero target, and it could open you up to more regulatory scrutiny if you have weaker targets than the pool. So that's one probably for discussion today. And the questionnaire results that were sent around did also show a majority preference for setting a net zero target. So that's probably one for the committee to discuss within your policy. So it's all been sent around in advance, so I'm going to take it as read. But is there any points that the committee want to raise within the policy?
Thank you. I'm sure there will be. I've got quite a few, but I'll probably
Got
hang
my
back.
notepad ready.
I'll probably hang back on mine a bit and go around the table, I think. I do have a general principle that I'd like to check with you on. And it relates to what the last issue dealt with, the net zero one. So the government are currently discussing and have murmured about changing some of their targets. If we have targets which are within the investments, currently the figures which we are seen to be using or centrally using mirror what the government policy and strategy is. So if the government policy changes, I guess there are two possibilities. One is if they change it and bring dates forward, would that require us to revise the information that we've got? And if they push the date back, is there any encumbrance on us having a date which seeks to address a net zero proposition earlier than the government actually requires?
So not necessarily. Your target date does not need to match government alignments, and quite often within pension schemes, it's a different type of assets. It's not necessarily possible to have an advanced date versus the government could set more ambitious targets in the pension scheme, for example, because the pension scheme assets, it might not be possible to invest in such a way that meets an earlier net zero target. It might not even be possible to meet the net zero at 2050 target, but that is the aim of the target. So you can have a separate net zero target to government, and it can be more or less realistic. I would imagine it's going to more or less ambitious. I would imagine it'll be less ambitious than the overall government targets for net zero.
So our policy only is just that. It's a policy which establishes a principle that we're seeking for them to, the actual achievement of that policy would be down to the individual investments or to the individual fund.
It'll be down to the pool, and they'll be responsible for hiring the managers to invest those assets, or they will also be investing them directly. So in the pool, they will both have their own internal teams managing the investments, and they will then also hire managers to manage specific investments. Now, it's easier to achieve net zero in something maybe like listed equities than it might be in infrastructure, where the infrastructure might be roads, for example. So every asset class is different, and how you can achieve net zero within those asset classes is more well trodden than in some other private market asset classes. For example, like private debt, how do you manage and monitor what net zero means in private market loans, for example? So there is a lot of work to be done in order to be able to monitor that. Most of the focus has been on listed assets like bonds and equities, and it will be the responsibility of the pool to make sure that your assets are invested in line with those targets, but they then might delegate that further to the investment managers who are actually selecting the assets.
I'm sorry to delay a bit, but so would we receive from each fund within the pool a report on the net zero compliance issue? And if so, in terms of how it's been met or how much of it has been actually met or achieved, and would that actually, I assume I'm making a lot of assumptions here because it's the future, would that actually identify how those targets have been met, i.e. through an offset or some other measure?
So that will be at a pool level. So it might be that the assets are invested in line with that target on a whole. So some might be above and some might be below, but the pool should be reporting on all metrics with regards to responsible investment and carbon emissions, etc. And they will get all that information from the underlying managers. But it will be up to the pool to then hold the underlying managers to account for those net zero targets. But you should be getting reporting from the pool.
So we wouldn't get it per fund, we would only get it for central as a pool.
You might get it per bucket or per fund, depending. So within the pool, your investment strategy is going to be invested across 9 asset class buckets, and the pool will determine what is made up in those buckets. That's yet to be decided for a lot of those buckets, and therefore what they will report on for each of those elements of your investment strategy. But ultimately, it's not been fully determined. The pool haven't yet published reports under the new regulation post 1st of April, but you should be getting underlying components at least from the buckets. Whether you get them from every single manager, the pool could have up to 50 managers.
Sorry, Louisa.
Yeah, hopefully it adds to what you're saying, and I believe they've got a team of 10 or 12 people that just look at these numbers, just separately dedicated, and they've been doing this for about 10 years, Emma.
Yeah.
Already looking to bring this in for the funds that they've already been working with. So yes, I do believe we would get a report. I think a lot of people are further along their journey. And yes, the equity class is the one that's got the most metrics established at the moment, but they have a whole team dedicated just looking at this. And then, I mean, they've got teams that look at specifically like voting. That's a whole separate team. That's a team of 2. There's another team that does something else. So yes, we would get a report, and they do have people solely dedicated to looking at this, if that helps.
Thank you. I do like the idea of 10 people looking at numbers all day. That's a thrilling proposition. Right, I'll turn to all my colleagues and see who'd like to go first. I'll do Vanessa and then Steve, and then anybody else who wants to
Yes,
ask any questions on this.
On page 105, I find it very worrying that paragraph where it mentions that the pool will actually virtually have control over investments. Quite frankly, how does the committee come even into play in this? We are being told what to do rather than giving advice or finding out what is happening. I really just struggle with that. And also, we talk about long-term stated beliefs. This committee is here to make sure our fiduciary duty is to make sure there's enough money to pay our pensions. And that seems to be pushed into the background or sideline. We keep on about ESG. And one question I would ask is, when we import all these goods from China and we talk about ESG, are sea miles, etc., all taken into account? Because I struggle with this. I wonder how many factors are being ignored. I have a thing about electric cars. In my book, there is absolutely nothing good about electric cars, partly because of the way they're made, how the individual things they're made up from, such as slave labour in Africa for other things. We don't know what we're going to do with the batteries. Because of the battery, for example, garages have all had to install hoists because it's impossible to get the battery out of the car without a hoist. All these factors, we talk about ESG, are they actually being taken into account? Thank you.
And these are things that you can put in your policy in terms of reporting requirements and what you would like to see the pool report on. If you would like to see underlying emissions from every single manager, that's something that you could put into your policy to ask the pool to provide. There's different levels of emissions monitoring. So you get scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3. And scope 3 is all about the supply chain. So everything that goes into making the products that are then used at the end. Scope 1 are like the direct emissions from using the product, like driving your car. So there are lots of people looking at how to try and measure these things in the best way. Obviously, data will not be absolutely accurate in every case, but they are working hard to try and improve the transparency around carbon scope emissions. That's just one element of ESG, but as data is becoming better and better and more readily available. But they do think about the whole supply chain when they're calculating carbon metrics.
Thank you, Emma. I think Steve wanted to jump in here. He's put his hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, we are engaging with the central pool on what the new world looks like, as it were, after the 1st of April. But there is a definite element of what the art of the possible is, certainly from the word go 1st of April, with all the other competing demands. Government wants to be up and running, so we don't necessarily have answers as to what that new world looks like and what we're there to get quickly from the new pool. And they do have to balance the fact that they're taking on another 7 or 8 funds, and so we'll have 15 funds, all with their particular requirements or quirks, as it were, of what they want. And there's also a kind of overarching consideration from the pool's point of view that government have asked them to place a factor of thinking about economies of scale on how things work, so that there's some clear benefit from economies of scale as well. So how that plays out, I guess, just in summary, really, is a little bit of an unknown in the new world of pooling. So we'll just have to see how some of it looks like after the 1st of April, I'm afraid.
I think we can be very happy that these things don't have to be in place until the 1st of April, which is still some time away, and there's plenty of opportunity for the government to add more requirements. I'm being a little flippant, apologies there. Martin. I was still on the answer to this one before I move on to another question. Is it a different question?
It's on exclusions, so
right, I'll come to you in a minute, Martin. Steve Milford was next. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for producing this policy. It covers a lot of ground. I think it covers the environmental issues quite well. We could perhaps have a bit more on the sort of social and governance side, but I'm sure it's a policy that can be developed periodically and added to. Did you touch on divestment and the engagement issue on page 106? But the only point I would make on that is that, yes, engagement should be the first option, but sometimes you're going to be in a position where it's not going to work and divestment does need to be a more active option. I think some of the companies that have been involved in Gaza, like Palantir, and the military equipment, Airbnb, were sort of marketing properties illegally built on the West Bank. Got Israeli banks actively funding the Gaza invasion, and Lockheed Martin, for instance, making the missiles and the helicopters that have killed up to 70,000 people. So I think there are occasions you can't wait 2 years. You have to make a decision as to whether you should divest from a particular company at a certain point in time. So I would add a line along the lines of, or there is clear immediate evidence of a company's actions being in opposition to our responsible investment beliefs, so that we don't just say, oh, we're going to engage with these companies, however awful they are, forever, but we actually threaten them with divestment at some point if they are clearly abhorrent and against our principles. Welcome the exclusion list on page 110. It's very helpful. I think that's a for example list rather than necessarily an exhaustive list. I'm sure we could all think of other things that could be added in there. And the final question is, again, I like the bit on local investment. How would that actually be managed if we are talking about Isle of Wight investments? Because clearly the central pool might not be interested in investing in the Isle of Wight. So do we get a sort of pocket of money that we keep to one side, say, this is what we want to invest locally? Sorry, it's quite a lot there.
So I'll jump in before I turn to Emma. I think the change you were proposing was on paragraph 9 on 106. But regarding the local issue, this is quite important because it comes into our ideas about housing in particular. The word local, we've always interpreted, of course, or tried to do it as Isle of Wight. Local here is within the jurisdiction, but is the area, would that be the area of central? Would that be called local, or would local remain as the Isle of Wight?
So on page 114, we've tried to articulate what we believe the views of the committee would be. So it's almost tiered. So initially we would view local to be the Isle of Wight. And then the broader pool area, recognising that you need some element of diversification to a property strategy. And so your priority focus for Isle of Wight assets, you would want to be on the island, but recognise that it might be part of a pooled fund that invests in the wider central area. So the way that they are going to invest locally through property has not been determined yet. These are the things that you will need to feed into in the development of the products. So even the governance arrangements for the pool are still subject to evolution, but they expect to have various sub-forums from which an officer, a senior representative from the committee will go and represent Isle of Wight's views at. So they might have one on responsible investment, they'll have one on local policy, local investment, and they'll have ones on, reporting, for example, and you will go and say, this is what we want from the pool. So these are things that still all need to be developed.
So just two observations, if I may, coming back on that. One is the word may and need to be developed leaves me a bit vacant because we're trying to make definitive decisions on something which is not yet established. And secondly, the in-person representation sounds quite onerous.
What will be, there's going to be a lot.
I'm assuming that diversification would not be diversifying between Freshwater, Gunville and Horsebridge Hill. It would be diversifying on a broader basis within the whole of the central region. Would that be right?
It'll be up to you. So all you can do is say what you would like from a local investment policy to the pool and try and engage with them to create the investment vehicle in order for investments to be made on the island.
Okay. You can tell what we're trying to do. We're trying to get past the to be decided to find out what's real and tangible at the moment, and does seem to be not so much. I'll go on to Steve because he's put his hand up online, and then come back to you, Louisa. Steve, online. Steve? He's frozen. When you come back online, we'll pull you in, but I'll go to Louisa in your absence.
Yes, just to say, it's been quite interesting when we have listened to what some other people are doing. So, for example, Hampshire have been doing quite a lot of investment. They've actually got some investments on the Isle of Wight in some holiday camps and different things that they were mentioning. It would be nice to know that some of those things might carry on into the pooling world, whether we join up and we like those, another matter. There's also the mayor thing. I think the critical thing to take away is that some people have been actively going out there, like Hampshire. They've been looking for opportunities, and the main thing is what the categories are to put forward and think, do you know what, that fits the bucket, I'm going to put that forward as a suggestion. I think that's the critical thing you need to focus on, and that's what the mayors will also need to focus on. So yourselves and the mayor will need to focus on what is the category that would be a good investment that could be put forward, and then you can put pressure to say, why is this not being considered, please, because it ticks all the boxes. Does that make sense? So
it does. I'm just surprised to find that Hampshire have got investments on the Isle of Wight, but
they do, yeah.
I'll get over that surprise. All right, so the next question then I think came from Ian, and then I've got Martin, and then Joe, and then Nick, and now I've got Ed as well. So I think we're opening a bit of a can of worms here. I have to say the lack of definitive knowledge here does trouble me. and in conversations others too. And we do need to get past the point of having, you know, open-ended don't knows or to be decided. And we do have to get to something that's definitive, that effectively at the end of the day, we can sign off on as a document, you know, as a deal. Sorry, Ian.
Thank you. And you're virtually on with your last comments onto what I was coming to with mine, which is I'll touch on page 113, and it's about the monitoring, and at least you know, it needs to be monitored at least a year, etc. And I'm a bit concerned with that, because to me, there's nothing, you know, I don't want to be put in a straitjacket with it, but I think, you know, we need to be a little bit more definitive with that area of, okay, if we're going to monitor, then let's monitor, and we might need, and the list and the points below absolutely identify the importance of making sure that this arbitrary, at least a 12-monthly cycle isn't good enough or firm enough for what we're trying to achieve here. I don't think, unless you can enlighten me on something that's even probably better, or reports elsewhere. But I think if we're going to get governance, and we're going to look at monitoring and the implementation and the results and things that are going through, we need to make sure that's hammered down a little bit more. Otherwise, we'll be voices in the wilderness. Thanks.
So that was in reference to how often the pool would report to committee on local investments. Would you like it to be more often than that? You can put that into your policy, so you can have local investments be monitored at least quarterly.
Well, I think that would be far more, you know, an advised way to go than, and to make sure that we have got that, because, and I would say at least quarterly, because you never know, you might program in quarterly meetings, then find that something is going, you know, that, well, I was going to say belly up, but something might be occurring that really we've got to act on.
And this will be coming down to the responsibility of the committee versus the responsibility of the pool. So the pool will be responsible for setting up a vehicle in which you can invest locally. So you'll put your money into that, and the pool will decide where it's invested, whether that be on the island. Now, how they come up with the investments specifically, there are different proposals, and the guidance is vague from government. It's just work with the local mayor. But whether there's a lot of being banded around about due diligence, so both the councils and the pool coming together to agree on what would make a good local investment. So local councils putting forward proposals, like Louisa said, within parameters for the pool to consider, and then the pool to decide how the fund generally is made up. They would then report back to you on whatever basis around that local investment. You won't, as a committee, be deciding what assets are invested in directly within those pooled funds.
Okay, I'm just going to say one thing before I will come back to you and carry on. So that's an important thread that we've just drawn out there. The important thread is this comes in April, and talk to your local mayor. We don't have a local mayor until 2028 now. So I don't want to see this being used as an excuse not to invest in, for example, development of local social housing on council land for another 3 years. That would be unfortunate beyond belief.
Point of information for the help of the chair.
Yeah.
Because there'll be a strategic board set up fairly shortly in the sort of the mayoral area by the 4 strategic authorities, we should be able to we will be able to influence what's being considered by them, because they will get funding. At the moment, it's going to be 40% of the original 44 million, so it's going to be about 18 million. But we will be able to influence that directly through our membership, you know, the unitary authorities gathering, if that helps. Thank you.
Back to you, Ian. You had a supplementary, I think, carrying on here.
It's just a concern that I raise, is that this committee is responsible for the local government pension scheme for the Isle of Wight Council, etc. And I'm a bit concerned if we've got to adhere or look or discuss with the local authority how we're going to invest the funding in any way, shape or form. What you said was okay. It could be the mayor when we get one, or it could be, as my good friend Nick's mentioned, or Councillor Stewart's mentioned tomorrow night. But he did mention the local authority. Now I'm concerned that we might get some harebrained schemes, and I'm not saying we will, but we might get some harebrained schemes coming out of the local authority, which would like to draw on pension funding, and really all we're going to do is monitor, or are we going to have the wherewithal to say, right, no, that's not happening. We don't want the tail wagging the dog.
I suspect we probably will get that though. Emma.
So it will be the pool that decides what constitutes an appropriate investment within the local investment pooled fund, and then how that then performs, you will hold the pool to account. So are the local investments made by the pool performing in line with what your expectations are for your investment strategy? Are they just almost like the pool is now your investment manager? So you're delegating authority to the investment manager to select the investments on your behalf. You can say, we would like this type of investment, we believe this, please implement that in your strategy, and the pool will have the right to do that or not do that and justify why they haven't. In any case, they will then have the fiduciary duty to invest the assets on behalf of the pension fund. So you'll be signing something called a fiduciary manager agreement, and the parameters around which you will monitor the pool are still being agreed between the pool, the lawyers and the officers. So there needs to be some form of accountability of the pool. They can't just invest all your money and say, well, it's returned zero, but we thought it was a good thing at the time. So your job is now going to be pooling oversight. So how well is the pool investing your assets on your behalf? Are they taking your beliefs into account? Are they making the products available that you would like to invest the pension fund's assets in, rather than the kind of nitty-gritty underneath detail of what they're investing in?
Yeah, again, it's the wording that we would need to be, it's future tense, because it's not, there's no agreement on this at the moment. We have no document that says, here's the contract with all the terms and conditions, here's the enforcement, here's the regulatory environment that sits behind it. Here's exactly how the scrutiny program will work on it. We are really flying by the seat of our pants, aren't we here? Yes. Feels very uncomfortable. Martin, you were next, and then I'll come over to Joe and Nick.
Yes, it was a question for Emma, just on the take into account all the exclusions that all the funds in the pool will have. And I know the London Civ, the London Pool, is developing 3 pillars of a kind of a light touch exclusion list, and then a medium, and then the full. Everyone, lots of investments are excluded. Is that something that Central is looking away at capturing, directing exclusions into?
I'm not aware of how they're going to tackle that so far, but they are setting up an RI sub-forum, which you'll send a senior officer to start the process of developing those things. So they might follow suit with L7, offer a kind of tiered way in which you can invest, but it will still be up to them which one you go into. They'll take your desires into account, but they will still ultimately determine, and that could be things like economies of scale. If they don't think that they've got enough people to support one pool or one type of tier, then they might not offer it, for example. They still have ultimate responsibility for how those assets are managed. And there's definitely an element of having fewer funds than many, because there's efficiencies to be gained there. So what they will offer in terms of exclusions has yet to be determined. They are just now focusing on how all the assets from the seeding pools are going to be brought in, and that's the main focus of the pool just now.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Lever.
Emma may have just answered my question inadvertently anyway, because similar to the concerns raised by Steve earlier, I think the list of beliefs we've got, including what's specified in the exclusion draft on page 110 is good. my question was, and it probably might be the sub forum you were talking about, is obviously it states that the pool would come to us with exclusions, but I was thinking more about the engagement the other way around. If we believe Central on excluding certain businesses that we would like to see on there, how do we propose that to them? I'm presuming we'd have to evidence why we're doing that, but then I was just thinking of what that loop back into that would be like.
So the way they've got it structured just now is the sub forums in which a senior officer will attend on behalf of the Isle of Wight, but they are going to have public forums as well that will be held apparently 2 times a year. So anybody could attend them as well to hold the pool to account. But the whole governance structure for pooling oversight is still to be determined, and an independent party for monitoring pools oversight appointed by the funds potentially collectively to hold the pool to account, and they will look in detail at everything the pool's doing, how they're investing, and are they doing things in line with what the funds want. And I think that's going to be a huge element of making sure that the pool are accountable. Otherwise, they can have kind of carte blanche as to how things are invested.
Louisa, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say this document is this document is quite useful to be able, because it does set out what your views are. So they will be looking at this document and then using it. So I guess my question is back to Emma in terms of how frequently would the committee like to review this document, because this is kind of your instructions as to what you would like. So it is quite a key document for you, what you're talking about in terms of setting out what you want on exclusions, what you want on local investment, what the range is going to be. These are your sets of instructions in a way. So I hear there's lots of things, but as I say, I think this is more than we've had probably before to be able to take to someone to say this is what we want, but it can be developed. So I guess maybe just questions about how often you'd want to review or how practical it would be to review this document, because it's so new at the moment, and others are further along the journey. So, you know, maybe you want to refresh it a bit sooner and reflect on and think, actually, we want to go more because others have gone further in this area. So
good list of questions, I think. A supplementary.
Sorry, yeah, just on that point, I guess from my perspective, I agree. Almost, I wouldn't be sure until we start moving forward with Central. So we'd almost need a bit of time to allow it to bed in and understand the processes and see how reactive and responsive they are to the documentation we provide to them. But then after that point, if we feel something's not quite working, it's so yeah, I'm not sure yet how often we would want to do that as a committee, but certainly fairly frequently, I'd imagine.
Yeah, typically you wouldn't necessarily review this type of document more than annually, but given the circumstances we're in, what we could do is post 1st of April, the governance oversight should all be established of how the pool is going to engage with the funds, and then you'll have a few months of those meetings taking place, and then maybe say in 6 months' time you could review your policy relative to how those meetings have gone and how you felt the pool have taken into account the consideration. And then also, because we'll do more training on this in this afternoon, but the 4 funds that you've got that are currently moving into the pool, there's only one of them that actually has a direct mapping just now that's going to be invested into something else. The rest is all wait until we've had a chance to look at it. So how long that's going to be, the current backstop on that is the 31st of March 2028. So that's when Access and Border to Coast and Central expect all of your funds to actually be invested in Central products. So this will be over a couple of years.
I wasn't, well, it was, that was, I was absorbing the information while it was being given and trying to work out what the definitive conclusion of that was. I think it's, there isn't one. It's a wait and see episode still. Councillor Stewart. No, you were first, and then I'll come to Councillor Blake.
Right. Well, first of all, thanks for producing this. It's a very, as always, to have something in front of us gives us much more to actually really consider. I think it's important as a committee that we consider it together because, of course, we actually cross-fertilise. The first thing, a couple of points. Firstly, on the timing for this document, is it better that we have something in early and then try and adjust it? which I think is, okay, that's fairly, so you answered that. That's what I thought. So rather than try and hold this back and perfect it, which we probably would never do anyway. The second thing is the Isle of Wight local approach, which is what we all want, which is local investment. The council does not have a very successful record in this, in the sense that when it did have money to invest, it definitively invested away from the island. And the island has the problem that, because of infrastructure issues, invariably investing in the island is very difficult. So that is something which we need to consider to make sure that the pool, in the same way that we're trying to make sure that the Strategic Authority, the pre-mayor group, understand that part of the reason for investing on the island is that actually you can get a bigger long-term change than you can investing in other areas. It's a hope. I mean, we specifically mentioned, one of the things that you mentioned in investment that we have here is my old area of innovation from universities. Of course, we don't have one on the island, not going to get one in the near future either. So what we're looking at is, how do we actually manage, how do we make sure that the pool is aware of what we actually have here? Now, we have got an economic development board, which actually, strangely enough, met yesterday. And there is no overlap between what they are considering and the possibility of local investment funding from the pooling arrangement or from the pension fund. So that is a mismatch at the moment. And so when we talk about, and you talk about how the pools themselves will provide some capacity to look at local opportunities, that is going to be critical because of the lack of local authority capacity, but also generally capacity within the island to actually promote what is available. Sort of attracting inward investment approach. Sorry, the Economic Development Board. It's a fairly limited body, but it is there, and it does include some of the sort of more important players of this particular setup. So really the question is, how do we firm up the offer from the Isle of Wight by utilising the capability of the pool to look at the Isle of Wight? And one particular question, under page 112, and you've got down, local investment return should at least exceed the investment return assumed under the actuarial discount rate. Now, that's a very straightforward approach, but it doesn't have immediately there a countervailing recognition of the impact that it might have in the local environment in terms of improving the domestic economy. Because infrastructure problems, as a background, and I'm sure that most people know this, the issue with ferries, the infrastructure issue with ferries, however you want to describe it, has an impact of at least 25% on the GDP of the island. So it's very significant, those infrastructure problems. And actually, given the sort of recent road problems that we've seen on the island, you can also see internal infrastructure problems. So yeah, if I could come back to that particular one, is there any opportunity to suggest to the pool or encourage the pool to actually take account of some of those factors?
Short answer, yes. So the mechanism with which things will be proposed to the pool to invest in is yet to be determined, but the pool have appointed somebody that is going to head up this area from the 1st of April. So what I'd maybe suggest is, at the next meeting, getting somebody from Central to the committee that you can ask more directly, how do you expect this to work in practice? And that process by which everybody feeds into the pool for potential opportunities needs to be better established. What you could do within your RI policy is that set out an expectation for that level of impact to be measured and monitored and reported back as well. So not just, at least your discount rate is probably the most prudent you could set. That's not, that will be lower than typical property returns more generally, but it would make sense not to go below your discount rate that's assumed in your valuation, because then you're deteriorating the value of the fund. But we could extend the objective there to include a statement about measuring impact as well on the island. You could be more definitive in, so it says local areas first and foremost to be defined as the geographical boundary of the Isle of Wight. You could extend that to be, and you expect investments to be made on the island as part of the kind of wider pooling group. There has to be a minimum allocation to, I don't know, 3-4% of the overall fund. You can say these things and then that's what you want them to do. But I would probably suggest getting somebody from Central on to the next meeting so you can quiz them in a bit more detail.
Yeah, sorry, if I just add to that, it was useful. There was one session where we heard roughly around the room, because lots of the other authorities have been questioning how are the pool going to implement what they've already set up locally. So people in Cambridge were saying, well, we're back, people are knocking down our door because we've got all these, science centres, and they're all coming at us because they're used to asking for grants and for money. So we just can say Cambridge and we'll keep it here. And then there's another example where someone's saying, well, we consider a lot of people go across the border for work, so therefore we're not going to restrict it to just our county, because people go across, they're looking at impact there, and they're thinking about what you're talking about in terms of where do people actually live, or where do they work. So would we be cutting ourselves off by just defining this area? So all authorities are actually considering this and putting things forward based on what they're currently doing and what their views are. So I do think it's very good to consider that impact on what you want and what's best for the island. And they will have to listen. And yeah, there's a new person coming on board. I think the one ask we will be asking for them is, what is their set parameters? So will it have to meet a threshold of however, million, or what is that threshold, and what are the characteristics? So kind of like a simple crib sheet that if you were go to the bank and say, I want you to invest in my business, that's what we need at the moment, is just a simple checklist of, right, you need to hit these 5 things, so we can make sure that you can send it around and say to people, look, you're going to fit this category, put it forward. It's a great suggestion. And that's what we kind of need, tangible stuff. But yes, in this policy, if you want to define the impact area, others are also starting to considering this based on what they're currently doing and also what they want in the future themselves, if that helps.
I constantly ask myself in these discussions, if I was in a commercial environment, how close would I feel to signing a deal? And not close is the answer, but we do have to move forward with this. So Councillor Stewart, another one.
I agree entirely, because you do look at it from outside when you've been elsewhere. Specific projects which were mentioned, and obviously there's the film studio development in Bedina, which is a very substantial and major investment into the island. Investors themselves have recently received slightly under 20 million to set up a large-scale composite centre. When you actually look at the innovation, what I would call the innovation developed as the innovation ecosystem, the Isle of Wight is missing a lot of the pieces that we need, and part of those is centres of excellence. What you're looking at there is 2 possible centres of excellence. The composites will be one of 3 in the UK, and the film theatre is likely to be it's a smaller than the very large ones, but is actually relatively unique in the UK. But again, it does have very, very major people behind it and moving forward into actually developing it. It has plan permission, all the rest of it at the moment. So, those are the sort of things that an Economic Development Council could put forward, and so that the pool itself will be aware that those opportunities do actually exist. So the idea of bringing somebody from Central here to encourage them to consider these opportunities is really helpful. So thank you.
No more hands up, which is good. Oh, sorry, Councillor Blake.
And then me.
Oh, and Vanessa. I think, is he unfrozen yet? Or did he? Right.
Chair, a couple of questions. A large part of the second has already been answered. And I've sort of posed a bit of a hypothetical situation in regards to divestment in terms of what would happen in this scenario. Say, for instance, we're invested in a company that has been flagged up as one that doesn't fit our morals anymore. The price of that share and that company starts to slip. So I'm guessing that in the meantime, the asset manager would go, all right, that's slipping back, so we'll divest in that separately for a financial reason. Does that company then slip off the radar in terms of a company that we are looking to put on our naughty list, for want of a better word, or does it remain on there in terms of, are we constantly looking at all companies to put on our red list, or is it only ones we're currently invested in? Because on the flip side of that, if that company was to start increasing back in price again in terms of being a more attractive investment to the fund manager, would it then come back onto our list of companies we're invested in, despite the fact we may have been doing morally? So do you get what I'm saying here in terms of, because obviously if we're going to take 2 years to potentially decide whether a company is morally attractive or not, in the meantime, you've got the whole different world of it being financially attractive or not. So I wonder how the two interface each other.
How the pool will manage their kind of red list, and whether it stays there even though we've divested from it for future potential if the managers are then going to maybe purchase that. I mean, that seems sensible, but how the pool will monitor that, I'm not too sure yet.
But I think that's another one to add to the to be decided list.
So there's one other question I had, just very quickly around the local proposals. I mean, one of the questions is where's the front door for those? But that's, so we decided we don't really know that. But my main concern with that is that it's a pooled investment. Therefore, it's a pool of areas, and everyone's going to think that their area is the best area to invest in. And obviously, on the island, we have the island tax, as Nick's already alluded to, in terms of that no like-for-like investment is going to stack up equally or better than a similar investment on the mainland in the other pooled areas. So I'm just wondering, like, is there any way that we can say that, you know, perhaps only will get the benefits from an Isle of Wight investment in terms of taking on the risk of it not being as good as a mainland-based like-for-like investment? Does that make sense?
Yeah, is that a fear that if the Isle of Wight investments put forward don't stack up against the other ones, then it'll never get any investment in the island? And I think that comes back to the impact point as well. It's not just purely on the theoretical numbers behind the level of return. It's about the improvement that can be made to people's lives on the island, etc. I think it is a good idea to have central at the next meeting to discuss how do they actually plan on taking in all these views and making sure it's fair, and that you're getting a fair deal by being part of the pool. And again, maybe bringing this policy back in 6 months to see if that's actually happened in practice, whether it needs to be
Or less.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was flippant, but I think we've made the point earlier more frequent. Councillor Churchman.
To me, the bottom line is that 5% of the Isle of Wight, 800, just under £1 billion, will be going into a pool which will be used to finance other councils. To me, that is what will happen, because we've been told that the pool will have the final say about where the money goes. And I'm not sure I'm happy with that. And I just want to make sure the committee understand 5% of our pension funds are going, in fact, to finance projects which aren't going to happen on the Isle of Wight because we are so small. And also what worries me is if that money goes to other councils in that area, will it be the same return as if the 5% that we are contributing went for example, into a hydroelectric plant in France, Australia, or somewhere else. That really does worry me. Thank you.
Don't have much else to say other than if the pool are creating a local investment vehicle, then everyone will set their own targets as to how much they want to invest in that vehicle. You've set in the policy around 2 to 5%. Other funds could set lower, could set higher, but they will obviously have a much bigger proportion of assets invested in that pool, which could then potentially be invested on the island. But the ultimate discretion on where those investments are going to be will be down to the fund manager. So it will be the ways in which the authorities interact with the pool and the fund manager to determine where those assets are spread. But I would imagine that the pool want to offer a fair deal to all of its funds. You're essentially their client. So, and you will be holding them to account of those things, but that's where pooling oversight becomes very important. So you can see what they're actually doing with the money and whether it's aligned with your policies and beliefs.
So we could, just to clarify that, we could say we will put 5% of our fund into local investments. The pool would then decide where those local investments are placed, and they could all be in industrial parks on the outskirts of Cambridge.
Your 5% is much smaller than everybody else's 5%, so it could equally work the other way in which you get an investment that's much bigger than the amount you've put into the fund.
I get that, but they might only choose to put in 1/4%, which might be the same as our 5%. But the key thing is we will not have the ultimate control, other than withdrawing our money, of where local investment is put. No. That's the bottom line. And I think it's just having that clarity is quite important. Steve, and then I think we'll start to wrap this bit up.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me back in. You used a very interesting phrase there, we are the client. It doesn't seem that way for a lot of this. Would it be impossible for this local investment pool to receive monies from each of the contributors, and then each contributor's money would be spent in the area they wanted? And if there were no local investments that were suitable, then they would just say, sorry, there are none at all. It doesn't seem to be rocket science to have 20 local authorities all chipping into one fund and all saying we want our bit in our area, and if there's nothing in our area that's suitable, fine, we can't do it. But I can't see why we should be investing in 19, say, other local authorities where we've got no direct interest at all, just to get our tiny bit of investment. Why couldn't it just be hypothecated to our area?
It's certainly possible. They'll be designing the solution. I'd imagine that they will be concerned about, concentration risks, diversification, economies of scale. They won't want, it's very time intensive and expensive to monitor loads of assets within a property portfolio, for example. It tends to be a little bit more constrained. But these are questions that you would put to the sub-forum that is around designing these products for the clients, which is important why you have the representation on that. So having clear boundaries of what the committee believe as being, we believe the geographic boundaries are the Isle of Wight when we consider local investment, and you just need to keep drumming that into the development conversations.
Sorry, Chair, we couldn't hear you on the mic there, just if you were talking to the screen in case you were looking for one of us.
Hello, Paula. I was trying to get through to Steve Harrison. See if he's back with us again in the land of the living.
Hello, thank you, Chairman. I am after a few struggles. Apologies for that with a laptop. I think Emma's just covered what I was going to say. Essentially about engagement with the investment pool on this. It's probably worth hearing from them, and they might highlight what the art of the possible is straight away, 1st of April, when they've got 15 funds joining them, all with different requirements against the backdrop of all the other requirements of government. What's possible 1st of April this year might be a little bit different from what's possible in the future as well. So that's something to bear in mind. and is worth hearing from them directly. So just to kind of endorse what Emma said on that one. I think the only other thing, and forgive me if I've cutting across anything that's already been said or stepping on any toes with Emma here. I heard a little bit about the issue of exclusions, and I think I've read in the recent guidance from government that they're suggesting exclusions for a particular company or a particular country should not be part of the RI policy. So that's draft guidance, but will be something I have to keep an eye on, of course.
Thank you, Steve. That must be very hot off the press. I've not heard that myself yet, but it is a moving feast. Okay, with that, I'm going to come to a number of things within the document because clearly we've had a number of proposals. The first one I'd like to point is to bottom of page 112 and the top of page 113. The target allocation, it says, for local investment is between 2 and 5%. And I'd like to see if there's consensus within the room to just make that 5%. So we have a very clear target for what we're looking to do. It does come back to this eternal discussion about what local will actually mean. But I think if we have a target of 5%, that's a reasonable thing to do. Having a range as a target always seems to be very strange, particularly a very wide range. Councillor Blake.
Chair, can we caveat that by saying 5% if it's invested on the Isle of Wight, or maybe something to words to that similar effect? Only I'm sort of conscious that local investment might not necessarily be some of the most profitable investments. And if we're saying 5% in a Manchester social housing scheme, that wouldn't be what I think that we would want from that, considering we'd be letting down maybe another investment stream. But I think we would all be agreement if it was 5% if it was invested in the Isle of Wight specifically.
Good. So we've been reminded several times it's our document to define. This is our chance. So would there be agreement then that we change that to 5% if invested on the Isle of Wight?
Yeah.
I mean, we can. I'll leave it to officers to find the exact wording that defines these things. But is everybody okay with that, Councillor Lever?
I'm not sure about this because I get what everybody's saying, but we'd still, regardless of where the investment is, we'd still be benefiting from the return, right? So it feels very parochial to say that we'd only be investing this if it's on the Isle of Wight, because if each fund says that, then what's the point in pooling? You know, I don't know. It just seems. But yeah, I'm happy with some sort of guidance to insist on, yes, we want to see investment on the Isle of Wight. Of course we do. I'm just cautious about saying we will only invest 5% if it's on the Isle of Wight.
I would never recommend investing that amount of proportion in such a concentrated thing within your investment portfolio. That would be a huge concentration risk and could materially affect the funding. Putting it 5% would put you at the top end of what other funds are committing to invest locally. And we put the 2 to 5 in there because it's going to be a gradual build up over time, over investments. I'd maybe caution setting it straight at 5% and you're being held to account of being invested 5% of your assets into something you don't really know what it's going to look like yet. So I don't know whether you'd be better off keeping a range, allowing it to build up, seeing what the pool are offering, and then in the 6 months' time when this comes back, look at, are we comfortable with making that a strong recommendation of 5%? Are they investing on the island? Have they made a commitment? What does it actually look like before saying this is what we want for definite?
So the 5% is in investing in your own local authority is the government limit, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So we could have up to 5%.
Yes.
By 2028.
Yes.
That would comply. Would that be okay, Joe?
I'm happy with the percentage. It was more just specifying that it had to be on the Isle of Wight was the concern. But
well, I don't think today we're going to be dealing with all the nuances of this because it's clearly going to be a living document for a while, isn't it? So let's just try today to give the officers some direction in terms of where areas where we're looking. They've listened to the conversation. They will get the gist of what we're trying to achieve, and let's ask them to try and put those those details in a form which is, well, first of all, legal and practical to actually deliver. Councillor Stevens, I think you're looking at me.
Well, I was interested in what councillors Lever and Blake said and the various responses. I just feel that there's a bit of both that could be put here with regards to benefiting local, and I think the word is benefit rather than investment, because I think that if we could say that, and this is not to be, I mean, we can tease this out and we can discuss this as we go along, as you quite rightly said, but I just feel that, instead of saying investing in the Isle of Wight, would be to benefit the Isle of Wight, and I think that could then mean investment directly in it or within the transport links, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Or indeed other bits of infrastructure which are not really including, if we just say investment in the Isle of Wight, because some people say, oh, it's only got to be spent on the Isle of Wight. Well, no, if we start to look at the beneficial element, I think this is where we need to be with the investment. Leave it at that.
Okay. I've got some other points that have come up during the conversation. I'll move on to those in a minute, but Councillor Blake.
Right, Chair, thank you. Just to say, my wording was probably a bit clumsy, but I think I said the point I'd like to make is that a 2 to 5% is a significant chunk of this pension pot, and that local investments are not going to be the highest yielding, so that there should be weighting given towards what our requirements are in terms of, which is to prioritise the Isle of Wight, given that our primary objective is to give our fiduciary duty is to provide as better income for our pensioners as possible, and so that can include a benefit to them. But yeah, so I appreciate both the council's input on that. But I say it's what I put forward was extremely clumsy in the wording. But it's just, I think we all agree with the gist of what we're trying to get towards.
Okay. So I'm not going to propose we wordsmith this today because we'll be here forever. So I think you've got the gist of what we're trying to achieve there. If we can leave you to come back with some proposition that addresses that, that'll be very good. The second thing that was brought up earlier was the proposal that we clarify 106 para 9 and qualifying the expression "not seen over time" is very vague. So I think the suggestion was, or if there's a clear and immediate evidence, and or however you wrap those in words, I guess you would need to define what source of evidence you might consider as being qualification for that. But if we were to say that qualification would include, for example, a ruling by the ICC or the ICJ, that would be a very good recognised qualification, particularly given that the UK is itself a signatory to those bodies, and we should be taking heed of what they say. So if we can leave you to wordsmith that one out as well. The next issue was one on the monitoring cycle. I don't think we were happy with annual. I don't think we were happy with that half annual. I suspect this is probably something that will go through a fairly rapid evolution over our next meetings. And so what I'm going to suggest is that we have this as a standing item on each meeting, one a month or one every 6 weeks or so going forwards. And that we have time between each of those meetings, all of us, to think about the version that we're currently working on and to update it. It's not something that we would be proposing to Central as a one-off, this is it for life anyway. It's something that will be a discussion with them. And it sounds from what you were saying, Emma, that it is very much in a discussion mode at the moment. Nothing is tied down. And therefore, I think we should not tie ourselves down with something that's too hard and fast, but give them a best impression as we can at each meeting. That would be very good. And we're getting lots of nods, so that's all right. The next thing I had is based on what I've just said there in terms of what would qualify the term of evidence. And this comes out on page 110, bullet 6 at the bottom, with companies directly involved in human rights abuses. Well, the question there is who says? And again, I think if we were to include a reference to, I don't know whether that would include ICC, ICJ, United Nations, you know, wherever these things globally are decided in the international regulatory and legislative bodies. I don't know if there's an exhaustive list of those or a term that generally categorizes them. I don't know, but we'll leave you to.
I'll pick that up with our responsible
Okay.
investment colleagues.
Yeah. I think all the other questions I had in here are ones which the committee has brought forward, but which we're not going to get definitive answers on, because almost all of them seem to be decided. And so I think all we can do is monitor those decisions and those discussions as they come on, pull them back here as that standing item, and see how we want the results of those discussions to be expressed in the continuing evolution of this document. Because it may be that our scope to put things in the document is limited. But where there are opportunities, I'm sure we want to take advantage of them. So does that just about summarize where we are, committee? Are you all kind of happy with that approach?
I am.
Good. I was hoping to conclude this bit by 12, so I think we've almost got there. All right, so with that being the case, we do need to actually make a formal decision here. So I'll move it that we adopt the paper based on an expectation that it will be reviewed at each meeting and with the caveats that we've outlined just then, however that gets minuted, and Phil Megan can take account of that. And I'll look for a seconder for that proposition. Councillor Stewart, everybody in favour of that? Good, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. That was a very lengthy, but I think a very productive discussion. I think we all learned quite a bit from that. Okay, 5-minute loo break then. And while you're doing that, we'll consider passing a motion that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, namely agenda items 9 to 12 or an appendix 3 from the earlier section, on the grounds that there is likely to be a disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exception outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. And I'll look for somebody to second that. Thank you, Councillor Blake. Those in favour? And then I'll come to Councillor Spink, who wants to make a representation to us on his continuance. But we will also hold any officers online without kicking them out as well, if possible. We'll just hang on a second while Megan does her magic. And if anybody else wants to go to the loo, I'm not going to prevent you from doing so. It seems everybody's going for a comfort break. I'll do that in the confidential part of the meeting, because he may say things which are required to be confidential.
Do you want to keep your energy?
Oh, that's very good of you. Oh, Satsuma. Yeah, we got fruit.